Yo, 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 what is going on, everyone? Extra Father here, and this video is going to be what Call of Duty did wrong by Exclusive Ace. Now, I have the part 1 already reviewed, so go check that one out if you haven't watched it already. Let's get into it.
What's up, guys? My name is Ace, and today it's time for part 2 of my final review for Call of Duty Vanguard, where we're going to be focusing on what I feel the game did wrong this year. Now, if you guys have missed the first part of this series, I will leave that link down below, and I do encourage you to check it out. That's where I talked about things that I actually liked about Vanguard and some of the positives that I wanted to pull out. Today, we're focusing on the negatives, and we do have quite a long list to get through here, but just a couple things to point out first. First up, some of these are going to be subjective things, so it's just based on my opinion, and if you disagree, totally fine, although many of the things on this are also objective problems with the game. Another thing is this is focusing only on the multiplayer side of things for Vanguard, since that's all I'm interested in. And one final thing I wanted to point out here, even though this is going to be quite a negative video, really honing in on the things I didn't like about the game, I do want to be clear that I don't despise Vanguard. In fact, I think I like it more than a lot of the community does. But having said that, of course, it's nowhere near my favorite Call of Duty game, and there are a lot of issues to go through today.
Yes, sir.
And diving right into it, I honestly think one of the biggest issues with Vanguard, and one of the reasons it was nowhere
skill-based matchmaking, or it's too fast,
near as successful as it could have been, is simply the World War II setting that also didn't really stick to World War II. I don't think that...
Oof, yeah, that's a big one. That's a big one. The fact that I can shoot with a reticle on the screen in World War II.
General community was ready for another World War II Call of Duty game. In fact, when it was first leaked that it would be a World War II COD and we didn't know anything else about it anyway, there was a pretty overwhelming negative reception to that right away. However, there were, of course, people that were like, yeah, I definitely want to see a World War II COD with the new engine and the updated graphics. But then for a lot of those people, they ended up hating the setting as well because they didn't stay faithful to a proper World War II setting. And instead, they went with sort of an alternate history, kind of a silly toned World War II route. And I feel like that decision pushed both of those groups away, where even the people that were really excited for a World War II game, they ended up disappointed as well. Next up, I want to get into some of the technical issues that this game experienced. Most of these have been worked out by now, like eventually they got them fixed, but in many cases, it just took them too long to get on top of these issues, and by then, it was too late to recapture the players that these issues pushed away. Now, one of the big issues that I was fortunate enough to not experience very much, but I know a lot of people were experiencing this. I've seen tons of gameplay clips of it from people that don't have issues in any other Call of Duty game. This was extreme packet loss or packet burst.
Dude, the fucking packet bursts. Do you remember that? That was insane. That's what made me stop playing Vanguard at all. Like, most of the time in the games, there'd be a few seconds where I just, like, split back, I would move in places that I haven't been before. And it was weird. I was like glitching into the map. Oh, terrible times.
And I'm talking so extreme that the game was essentially unplayable. Like, you're just skipping and stuttering around all over the place. And at least in many cases, it didn't appear to be on the player's end at all. Additionally, there were really inconsistent aim assist issues early on, primarily with Xbox players. Again, this is something that I personally didn't experience because I play on PlayStation.
It didn't happen a lot. But it did happen to where you were just like, whoa, what the fuck is going on here? That isn't me.
And I just never really ran into this. But I know it was an issue for Xbox, and it did take them, I think, several months to get this one worked out. One of the technical issues that was more of just a minor annoyance, but I still didn't like it, and this is something that I did experience a lot early on. This was that weird bug where it was like a spotlight was following my character, and it was really jarring, and it screwed up all the shadows and everything around me, and it just made the game look horrible.
I haven't seen that one.
I feel like took a good couple of months for them to take care of. Another thing that I still experience to this day is inconsistent behavior with the destructible areas of the map, like destructible walls and windows, for instance. And this really made me hate the destruction in general. Like, I'm not opposed to the idea of having this destruction.
You know why they put it in the game, come on. To be Battlefield, and Battlefield's trying to be like Call of Duty, so it's like, what the fuck are we doing?
Areas, but the behavior in game was just too inconsistent, and I would have preferred if they just didn't have it at all. Just a couple examples. A lot of times you'd run full sprint into a destructible wall that you're meant to be able to sprint through and break, and yet it wouldn't break. You just run head into it and just stop dead in your tracks, which would screw up routes and just make things inconsistent. And another thing is oftentimes I would find my aim
like that shit right there. Sorry. To have a reticle on a gun like that in World War II really takes the immersion out of the game, and I really hate that.
Assist would be disabled while aiming through an area that had a wall in it, but that wall was destroyed. And regardless of what your opinion is on aim assist in Call of Duty, your aim should at least work consistently in all situations, and this caused a major inconsistency in many gunfights.
Sorry guys, my storage got filled up again. I don't know what the fuck is going on.
Next up, another technical issue that popped up a lot throughout the year is just a map rotation issue where, depending on the combat pacing option that you had selected and the game mode that you wanted to play, it seemed to significantly limit the pool of maps that you were able to play. Like, there'd be periods of time where it seemed impossible to play certain maps if you wanted to play your preferred game mode and pacing.
Yeah, and especially on a game like on a game mode like Domination, I felt like I was playing like 6 or 7 maps like all the time. And from a gaming perspective, you should have at least 15 or 16 of those maps playable for all game modes.
And that didn't really make much sense to me. I feel like all of the maps should have been available for all of the game modes and all of the combat pacing options.
They should have.
And that simply wasn't the case throughout a good portion of the life cycle. And honestly, I don't even know if they've worked this out yet. I haven't been playing enough lately to really keep tabs on that. But it was really frustrating to know that there were like 20 plus maps in the game, but because I like playing Tactical Domination, for instance, I only get to play like 8 to 10 of those maps for an entire season. And then the next season, it seemed like they would switch up the rotation a little bit, and it was a different set of maps that you could play. And another technical issue that I still run into with Vanguard is it will often get stuck searching for a match, and I believe it actually gets to a point where it's not actually searching even though it's telling you that it is. Like if it doesn't show the ping.
I haven't actually had that happen to me in quite a bit. But if that's still an issue, that's fucked.
Range that it's searching for, that means it's not actually searching for a game, and you'll never find a game. You can sit on that screen forever and you'll never find one. And while that's not a major issue because all you have to do is back out and search again and it will work the next time, it is still an issue and it's still present to this day.
Yeah, it's not a big issue.
Moving on, let's get into some more gameplay related things. The first thing I'm going to mention here is spawns, at least early on in the game's lifecycle. Now, you might have noticed I also mentioned spawns in the What They Did Right video. This is because I think with their big spawn overhaul, they actually fixed most of my spawn complaints and issues. Not saying this.
I don't really remember how the spawns used to be, but I'm pretty sure that the spawns used to be really bad.
Spawns are perfect now, but they're at least significantly better than at launch, because for the first couple or a few months of the game being out, the spawns were absolutely awful. It seemed like they were using a very similar system to Modern Warfare 2019, and it looks like Modern Warfare 2 is going to be following the same route here, at least early on in their life.
Weren't you spawning next to a teammate? Like, at all times?
Cycle. And with that early spawn system that Vanguard had, it made for horrible map flow and gameplay pacing. It just didn't make much sense. And therefore, it definitely deserves a spot on this list because I feel like that's one of the big things that pushed a lot of people away early on, and many of those players never came back to see how good the spawns ended up turning out.
Yeah, I guess
After that, let's talk about bloom, or aim down sight spread, or essentially just inaccuracy with the first shot that you fired. This is not to be confused with recoil or idle.
Recording?
Hey, come on.
Sway. I'm talking when your sight is perfectly on target and you pull the trigger, the bullet doesn't necessarily go right where you're aiming, and when the game first launched, the amount of aim down sight spread we had in this game was ridiculous. It was nowhere even remotely close to realistic, even with World War II era weapons, and in my opinion, this has no place in a Call of Duty game aside from maybe some niche weapons. If they want to make sure they're limiting a weapon's ability at longer ranges, then target recoil or idle sway or bullet velocity, or just add another damage range, for instance. Don't make it so my bullets are going in random places that I have zero control over, because it's literally randomized.
Yeah.
Now, to be fair, they did patch this, I believe, all the way back in December, and they significantly reduced the aim down sight spread to the point where it's essentially a non-issue. So since then, I honestly haven't really had any complaints about Bloom in the game. I don't feel like I've lost any gunfights due to Bloom. But still, it deserved a spot on this list, because I hope we never see this type of aim down sight spread ever return to Call of Duty. So the next thing, let's start getting into the weapons and the gunsmith. The first thing I'll mention with the weapons is the weapon grind to get a weapon.
Bro, you want to talk about the fucking weapon grind on this game? This game's weapon grind is so long. I could put 10 hours on a gun and it still not be right. It's still not be done. It's bullshit. The fact that I have to grind so long for a single weapon, and there's so many weapons in this game, I'm wasting so much time. And I have to do a different kind of fucking playstyle for these camos. So it's limiting me on my playstyle, and it's limiting me for a weapon variety. So go fuck yourself.
From level 1 all the way to the max level was absolutely ridiculous, especially early on. Now, they have been making it easier and easier as time has gone on, and I've definitely noticed a big improvement here over time, but I still feel like the weapon grind is too tedious, it takes too long, and this is made even worse with how important those late level unlocks are for weapons.
Especially for aiming.
And this sort of segues into another big issue that I had with the gunsmith in this game. And that is, I didn't like the fact that we had so many attachments that altered our damage or our rate of fire, essentially our raw time to kill of the gun. And not just by a small margin, we're talking massive differences that essentially turn it into a totally different gun that is on a completely different level.
Yes.
And the first reason I didn't like this is just the massive discrepancy between a gun at level 1 versus a gun when you max it out fully.
Yes, I can understand that, because at level 1, the time to kill is almost perfect. It's a little too fast, but if they slowed it down from there, I think the game would have been perfect. But as soon as you start adding attachments that do more damage and reduce the time to kill, the game goes way too fast, and it's almost at a breakneck speed, and I don't like that.
Like, of course, I'm totally fine with guns becoming a bit more powerful as you unlock more and more attachments, but it was to the point where it was such a night and day difference, and that grind was so long and tedious that it just became frustrating using such a terrible weapon for so long until you finally get that one attachment that turns it into one of the best guns in the game.
Yep.
Additionally, with many of these attachments, they altered your time to kill so much that the general time to kill that you actually experience while playing the game is too fast in this.
Yes.
I've said this before with Vanguard, and I'll say it again. I think the base time to kill with no attachments equipped on any of the guns, I think it's essentially perfect for a Call of Duty game. I really like the base time to kill of Vanguard.
A little too fast.
But when you start mixing in these damage and rate of fire altering attachments, you can often cut your time to kill almost in half.
Yep.
And at that point, the time to kill is just too fast, in my opinion.
Too much.
And on top of that, this also created an issue with crutch attachments on guns, where you're not putting attachments on to maybe help support your playstyle, or
you're putting attachments on a gun for more damage and more aim that completely changes the way that the gun is supposed to be used. Like, for instance, he's using a silencer and a reticle and probably something, some kind of attachment for the magazine to make this reload faster, and I'm fine with the reload faster, but give us something taken away. Take something else away instead of us just putting positives and positives and positives and positives on the guns to make them so different that you can't tell what the fuck you're shooting.
Make up for one downside with a weapon, for instance. It's basically, if you aren't using that attachment, you're doing it wrong, because it's just objectively so much better with that attachment equipped. And that's a balancing issue as well that was never really resolved. On a very similar note, I really don't like the fact that we have 10 attachments on our gun at any given time.
That's another thing.
And the big reason for this is it just didn't feel like there were any meaningful trade-offs to be made where you can choose a couple great attachments in these slots, but that means you're missing out on attachments in other slots. Instead,
you push and pull, you push and pull, you push and pull. There has to be a give and there has to be a take, because if you just have give, then you're having a whole different fucking gun in your hands.
It's basically you choose whatever attachments you want. It was far too easy to make up for any downsides of any of the weapons, which I feel led to guns having a lot less character in this game, because you can turn most of the guns into essentially that meta version of the gun that's very similar to all the other meta versions of all the other guns. And I just feel like this led to a lot of balancing issues, as well as a loss of character and variety with the weapon experience.
Absolutely.
With previous Call of Duty games, I feel like you had to learn to play to the strengths and weaknesses of weapons, and you had to adapt your playstyle accordingly to match that weapon.
Like, do you remember playing with snipers back in Black Ops 1? You remember how slow the wind-up time was, or the aim in sight time was? It was so slow that people couldn't really quickscope anymore, and it kind of settled the beef between a one-shot kill faster than a kill with a submachine gun. So, in a game like this, when you have so many attachments that make every gun so fucking hybrid, rapid, just in your face, ready to go at all times, it's harder to get the time to kill ratio correct.
Whereas in Vanguard, I feel like you just adapt the weapon to meet that one playstyle that you like. And while I feel like this led to more weapon variety overall, and I put that into the positives, I feel like this also led to less playstyle variety overall.
Yes.
And that also made for a less interesting gameplay experience, in my opinion.
Do you remember, there's a map in Modern Warfare 2019, and there's a map where there's a certain spot where it's like kind of like a tower, like you're pitched up on a tower, and you're looking down. The map has a helicopter on it, like a burned down helicopter on it in the middle of the map. And you're looking down, and that's a perfect fucking snipe place. It's perfect for sniping. There's nothing like that in this game. There's a lot of highs, there's a lot of lows. There's one map that I fucking hate, but I'm not going to get into it. I really fucking hate it. But yeah, there's no map like that in this whatsoever. There's no placements.
As for the next thing relating to the weapons in the game, let's talk a bit about the camo grind.
Fuck this camo grind, dude. Fuck it. As soon as you start limiting my play with camos, to get the camos, to get atomic, fuck you. I ain't doing that shit, man. It's the reason I didn't get atomic in this game, is because it's so fucking hard and it takes so goddamn long, especially with long shot fucking kills with a submachine gun. What? What are we doing? And then you have these like bazooka launcher camos that want you to get all these score streak kills and stuff like that, and it takes like 3 shots to take down a fucking UAV? What are we doing? What are we doing?
I feel like the camo grind in this game was way too slow and tedious.
Most of the reason I hate it.
Part of that was also due to the fact that the weapon leveling was too slow, and many of the camo options were unlocked at very late levels in your weapon unlocks, so it takes you a long time just to get started on those camos.
Yes.
But on top of that, I just found it ridiculous that you needed like up to 300 long shots with a single weapon, and you needed long shots on SMGs, for instance. And I just feel like so many of the camo challenges were also not engaging challenges to be working on. It wasn't enjoyable or fun to be going for hundreds and hundreds of long shots. Instead, it felt like you were sort of clocking into a job and just putting the time in, playing in a way that you really don't want to play in, but if you want that end camo, you've got to be doing it. And I think this also really significantly harmed how many people were playing and approaching the game, and that made it not really fun for anyone involved.
Yeah, especially when you have like two or like say there's 2 or 3 people that are really trying to get atomic for some reason. The fucking skin sucks, by the way. And You got like 2 people on the same team that are trying to get a camo, and they're playing to a certain play style to get the camos. So it's limiting everyone else trying to win the game. You see how that works? So the people that are actually trying to win the game end up having a bad experience because other people are not trying to win the game.
After that, let's talk a little bit about the perks in this game. And for the most part, I think many of the perks were just fine as they were, but there are a few key issues here that I wanted to point out. The first thing is the piercing vision perk. I don't think this should exist at all. I don't think you should be able to have a legal wall hack in the game just by shooting through a wall and not even necessarily hitting the target on the other side. Even if you're just hitting close to them, they start glowing in red through a wall. And that's one thing that, well, it didn't completely ruin my general...
It helps the play style of the campers, for sure.
...enjoyment of the game. I fundamentally disagree with having a perk like this in the game, and therefore it deserved a spot on this list. Additionally, with the fortified perk, it was essentially useless early on in the game's life cycle, but eventually they added a damage clamp, and for core game modes, I think it's in a good place. However, it's still horrible for hardcore game modes. Also, on that same note, they still don't have a separate hit marker indicator letting you know when you hit somebody with an explosive that's using fortified, which essentially lets you know that they didn't take as much damage as you might think that they did. Same thing goes with the battle hardened perk. If you stun somebody with battle hardened, you don't get an indicator letting you know that they had battle hardened. And with Serpentine, if you shoot somebody that's sprinting and they have that perk, you don't get a separate indicator letting you know that that bullet that just hit dealt less damage than it would have against a non-Serpentine user. Right. On top of that, we have just the sheer number of awareness-style perks, and I feel like they really lost the rock, paper, scissors approach to perk balance because of that, because it felt like you could only ever counter 1 or 2 of them, and that always left you exposed to multiple other perks. And that's something I didn't like as well. I think you should be able to counter like all of the awareness style perks if you use the one perk that's designed for that, but then that maybe leaves you open to explosives, or it leaves you showing up on the minimap when the enemy has a UAV in the air, for instance. The sheer number of awareness style perks in this game, I really feel like just threw perk balance off completely. And finally for perks, I don't like the fact that forward intel is in the game, even though I use it on...
What is forward intel? I don't think I've ever used it.
Every single one of my class setups. Because why wouldn't I? It's such an incredibly powerful perk. But I will say early on, before the spawn update, when the spawns were in a terrible state, forward intel was a lifesaver. I feel like it was kind of a necessary evil because the spawns were so bad. But I feel that's more of like a band-aid fix to a core problem.
Right.
And instead, they should just work on having the best spawn system possible so that you don't need forward intel, and then you can develop those higher level skills of spawn prediction, because that's traditionally one of the big high level skills in Call of Duty. And now it's just a perk, so you don't have to bother learning that stuff. You just throw a perk on, and just like that, you now have godlike spawn awareness.
No bueno.
On that same topic of spawns, something I feel was really missing from this game that I fully expected to at least be added at some point down the road, but I was very disappointed to see that it never was added. This is the Specialist Strike package, where you can give up the ability to earn kill streaks in a match, and instead you earn perks as you continue your streak in the same life. That's something that would have added so much more replayability for me, and I really wish they would have added it to this game, and I'm surprised they didn't, because their previous game did have a Specialist Strike package. On top of that, I also don't like the fact that they only had kill streaks. There was no score streak option. And again, that's something that they've done for their past couple Call of Duty games. I love score streaks in objective game modes. I feel like it gives a lot of incentive and reward for properly playing the objective and being a team player, which is often needed in a game like Call of Duty, where most people are doing things for their own selfish reasons. They're doing their own grind, focusing on their own thing. Score streaks really help to get those players involved a bit more on the objective because it supports their own self-interests as well. Now, moving on, let's talk about another mechanic they introduced with Vanguard that I'm not a fan of. This one isn't a massive deal, but I also feel like it was just a completely unnecessary addition that doesn't improve the gameplay at all. This is the suppression system, where if you shoot near a target without even hitting them, you can actually slow down their movement speed. And my reaction to that is just, why? Like, what does this add to the gameplay experience? How is that fun for anybody involved?
That happens?
Like, first up, why do we reward people for missing their target and not hitting them?
Yeah, that doesn't make sense.
Why are we punishing people who have successfully evaded that shot and not been hit by it? And how is that fun for anyone? Like, even the person that's nearly missing the target, I don't think they're thinking to themselves like, yes, I slowed them down because I almost hit them there, and now I can actually hit them. In fact, I think most of the time they don't really notice that, so why have it there in the first place? I don't think this adds anything positive to the gameplay experience. After that, I don't like the fact that Vanguard doesn't have factions, and therefore your teammates in the game, they can look literally identical to your enemies. And therefore you really have to be relying on those name tags more than ever before in order to identify whether that's friend or foe. Whereas in all other Call of Duty games that have a faction-based system, if you're good at paying attention to which team you're on and throughout a match you start recognizing which skins different players are using, that target acquisition becomes instant and there's never really any confusion between friend or foe because you know what your friends look like and you know what your enemies look like without having to rely on any heads-up display elements. Next up, let's talk a little bit about the MVP screen. This was
Oh, I'm not even gonna say it.
Awful, and I think almost universally hated with Vanguard. The MVP screen where they had to show 3 different animations, and there was no way of skipping these animations. It's horrible. It takes too long. The amount of time it takes from the moment the game ends to the moment that you're actually back in the lobby is far too long for a game like Call of Duty where the matches only last like 6 to 10 minutes usually. So I really hope the franchise learns a lesson here. I don't mind a really quick show off of like the top players in the lobby or whatever it might be. I just think the MVP screen was way overkill and took way too long.
Just make it quick. It doesn't have to be a fucking 30-second movie.
After that, there's one thing I wanted to mention here that I fully expected to be in this game, and it was never added. This is a firing range. And the main reason I expected it to be there is this is sort of Sledgehammer's baby. That's their thing that they brought to the Call of Duty franchise with Advanced Warfare, and people really seem to love that, and they welcomed it with open arms with COD World War II as well, and then we just never saw it in this game, which kind of sucked. And with that, before we get into like the last big issue and talking point that I have when it comes to things that I feel Vanguard did wrong, I just wanted to have a quick section here just talking about the typical modern Call of Duty problems. These aren't necessarily limited to just Vanguard. These are issues that we've been seeing for the past 3 years of Call of Duty, and I do want to point them out, but I'm not going to get into too much detail because
I can probably guess what it is. Skill-based matchmaking, player progression, connection issues.
I've ragged on about these so much over the past 3 years. But the first thing is I hated the player progression with a seasonal reset that was forced on you. Player progression and player XP meant literally nothing to me once again.
Makes no sense.
And that I find to be really frustrating. Additionally, I hate how they handle double XP tokens where they count down in real time, not in gameplay time. And well, like I said, I don't really care about player progression and player XP. I definitely cared about double weapon XP. And it just sucked popping one of those tokens and then the game just doesn't find you a match in 10 minutes.
God, I'm fucking yawning all the time. What is going on right now?
And you've wasted 10 minutes of that token through no fault of your own. And then finally, with these typical modern COD problems, strict and hidden engagement optimized matchmaking in a game that's not designed from the ground up to be a competitive experience. Now, to be fair, at least early on in the game's lifecycle, the skill-based matchmaking actually seemed toned down compared to the past 2 Call of Duty games. I don't know if that was just due to a lower player count or what that was. However, right around the mid-Season 3 update, I swear they flipped a switch on that and cranked it up, and it was a night and day difference. Literally from one day to the next, it was like I was playing a different game, and that seemed to persist for several months, although recently going back to the game, it seems like it's been loosened up again. But I swear, they cranked it with that one update, and I also immediately noticed that with my connection experience as well.
I need a drink. Hold on. Oh. All right. Got my Coke here.
My connection on average got a lot worse after that update, and my enemies also suddenly got a lot better. And that's one of the most frustrating things, is it's all hidden in the background anyway, so it feels like you're suddenly playing a different game, but there's no logical explanation for it. But on top of that, for these modern COD problems, disbanding lobbies. I really don't like disbanding lobbies. I've read on about that a ton already. I miss developing those rivalries, those friendships. I miss getting into a great connection lobby and being able to stay with that great connection lobby all night long.
Absolutely. You remember back in the day, you got on Call of Duty. You hit up one of your friends, right? Y'all start playing together. You guys got your mics on. You weren't in a party at the moment. You started playing Call of Duty. And you start trash talking, right? You get a bond going. You end up 1v1ing the person, having a few laughs, make a friendship, go on, and you just keep doing that. You keep making friends, and friendships in gaming is so important. And it's a really big reason why people still play Call of Duty. But that's gone. It's gone now. And it's sad. It really is. Because I really want to make friends playing this game. But when there's nobody talking in chat, it really kind of... It breaks the immersion of it, that it's a game. It's making you feel like this is a job, and it's not good. I wish we could go back to the old days. I really do.
And with that, we can move on to my final general talking point with what I feel Vanguard did wrong. And this was the lack of post-launch content and support.
Yes.
This year had some of the weakest post-launch support, in my opinion, and while they did eventually get on top of a lot of the issues, many of those issues took far too long to get to the point where it seemed like they already lost the majority of their player base, and they were never going to bring them back because it was just too late for them to fix the issues.
Still got that kill.
But on top of that, just looking at the content we got per season, we've now been conditioned to expect only one multiplayer map at the beginning of a season and another one mid-season, with one of those likely being a remade map as well.
I hate when people do this. I really do. I hate when devs do this. They did it with Gears 5, and let me tell you, you want to talk about drip feeding fucking content. Just can't come out with, like, why can't DLCs come back? Honestly. Like, it worked so fucking well. But whatever, we gotta make us money somehow. We gotta keep drip feeding.
Whereas with all previous Call of Duty games, we'd always expect at least 3 to 4 multiplayer maps per season. So that was a massive downgrade in that area. I didn't really find new seasons to be all that exciting. Like, sure, we got new guns, and that's exciting for about a play session or two, but after that, you're just playing the same game. And with the 10 attachments allowing you to turn that gun into whatever you want it to be, suddenly it has no character, and you're back at square one. Additionally, a lot of these seasonal events were Warzone only this year. You couldn't even participate in those events while playing Vanguard. You had to go play Warzone to participate in that, which is really frustrating as somebody that burnt out on Warzone and would much rather be playing a multiplayer experience. There was essentially no gameplay balancing or weapon balancing since about Season 2 or 3, I think.
Yeah, that was
that's
weird.
Quite out of the ordinary for Call of Duty as well. That's usually a continual thing that they're always tweaking and working on.
Right.
And I feel like that tends to mix things up and create more variety and more replayability with the gameplay over time as well. Yeah. On top of that, they brought in the arms race mode, I think with Season 2, or was that Season 3? I can't quite remember. But then they never really supported it. I think there was like a balancing and bug fix update for that. And then beyond that, they just abandoned it. There was never any new maps, never any new modes using that existing map that they had. I think the war game mode would have been a much better and safer bet for them. And people were asking for the war mode to come back. So I'm quite surprised they tried something new there and then didn't support it at all because I think it flopped. And then there's also the mention of a lack of party game modes. Now, we did get gun game, but in recent years with Call of Duty, we expect multiple party game modes to be added throughout the year. We've kind of been conditioned to not expect them at launch, but we do expect them to come down the road. And with Vanguard, we got gun game. Like,
there's no ingenuity left in Call of Duty, I don't think. And it's showing.
Where's the infected game mode? Where's one in the chamber, sticks and stones, or prop hunt, for instance?
They don't care.
These party game modes can really freshen up the experience and add a lot more depth and replayability because they play nothing like the standard modes in the game. It gives you a good place to go and just relax and try something new and different, and we just never got them this year. Essentially, the general theme of this entire section right here is I feel like they just did the absolute bare minimum to provide what was necessary when it comes to post-launch support.
Exactly.
It didn't really feel like they cared about trying to keep the existing players around long-term. They weren't trying to add to the experience. They weren't trying to make anything better. And it seemed like they just sort of gave up and cut their losses. And that's extra frustrating since over the years, Call of Duty has moved more in the direction of a game as a service, yet it feels like we got less service than ever before for a Call of Duty game. And from the business side of things, I get it. I think this game was a pretty big flop in Call of Duty terms. Of course, everything's relative to the rest of the franchise, not other games out there. But as a result, I feel like the decision was made there that this game's just not successful, and they're going to focus their attention and resources elsewhere.
So guys, that's going to do it for today's video. This is Xtra Father, and that was What Vanguard Did Wrong, a final review by Exclusive Ace. So I'll see you guys in the next one. Don't forget to subscribe. Peace.